And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101, our Thursday edition. And I would like to welcome all of you, wherever you're joining us from, whether you are joining from Guyana or you're coming from our wider Caribbean or from North America. Lots of you are joining us from North America, from Europe, welcome down to Politics 101. It's been quite a week. We started off on Tuesday discussing with the brothers Rickford Burke and Lincoln Lewis and Leland Saul, the missive that they have dispatched to the leaders around the world, especially in the United States of America, CARICOM, the EU, and Africa, drawing attention to the problems we're having with equality of as far as distribution of wealth is concerned. That has been quite an issue since August 2020. And so they have dispatched a petition signed by a number of prominent citizens, drawing attention to that problem. And then last evening, we had quite a big show. Nigel Hughes, as you remember, was on, and Nigel has begun to do what he has been calling upon us to do for a long time. And that is, in addition to our qualitative description of unequal distribution and racial problems that we have as far as that is concerned, racial discrimination. Kofi 250 the other day referred to Guyana as an emerging apartheid state. And Nigel has been saying we have to match our qualitative description of the problem with a quantitative description, that is data and evidence. And even the government people and their supporters have been saying, where is the evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the data? There's the data. And so Nigel has taken the initiative in terms of putting together that data. And so he was here last night with some preliminary findings. And those of you who were on, we were all in shock at what the data really showing. You know, the issue here is that that data resides with the government. Everybody who comes to do research in Guyana says it's difficult to get data from the government websites. And so it is very clear that they have been hiding the data. But, you know, our country is a small country, so there are ways of getting around that. And so as far as contracts are concerned, Nigel Hughes has begun to put together some of that data, and he shared some of it last night. And my God, were we shocked, even for those of us who have a sense of the disparities as far as distribution of wealth is concerned. It shocked us. The contracts and those big road projects. Khemraj Ramjattan has been talking a lot about those projects and license to export gold, quarries and stone, who have the contracts. Oh my, it's really amazing. And those of you who were here last night, sorry, the programs are on, and so you should go back and look at the program and share the link so that people who were not on last night would be able to see it. And what a revelation it was when you match the perception with the actual data. What a show it was last night. Tonight, we want to turn our attention to another burning issue, and this is the issue of electoral reform. Electoral reform. Long before 2020, all political stakeholders have been calling for electoral reform. Since 2020, of course, the urgency of electoral reform and larger constitutional reform have been on the agenda. But something as important as electoral reform, as we have said on this program over and over again, cannot be done by one stakeholder. They just cannot. This is a national issue. And it has to include all stakeholders, not just at the point of debate of legislation, but stakeholders must have an input in the legislation itself before it's drafted. And that is the only way that you are going to get satisfactory electoral and constitutional reform. What we had was the government did its own thing. Then it sent out and said, look, stakeholders, y'all come, let me hear what you got to say. And then the thing ended up in Parliament, in the National Assembly. And they used their one-seat majority to muscle this thing in against the pleas of the opposition, that the thing should be sent to a bipartisan select committee. So the opposition is not saying it doesn't want electoral reform. As I said, even before 2020, we have all been calling for electoral reform. But the opposition is saying this thing is too important for one stakeholder to do it. It's like the masquerade they have going on there. That's called a commission of inquiry. Two people in a contest, and one of them decided, I'm going to do an inquiry. So these amendments to Representation of People's Act are important because it can determine who wins or loses an election. It can determine who gets what, when, and where. And it can determine the quality of our democracy. We have also seen this bizarre, and that's a mild word when you're describing government of Guyana. This bizarre situation where government speeds through. The minister decide one day, this is going to be for local government election, and GCOM complied. And then recently, the opposition went to court and said there are a couple of things that are wrong here. One is that the minister is fiddling around with boundaries, unconstitutional. There wasn't time for claims and objections, unconstitutional. The case has not been heard yet. The opposition filed. And all of a sudden, the CEO at GCOM realized that the views of all stakeholders are important. And Mr. Gentleman decided that he will advise GCOM, oh God, you better don't go ahead with this thing. But you didn't know that all the time. The opposition commissioners have been pointing this out, in particular, Mr. Charles Corbyn. And the usual thing that I've been listening, the ears hard, stick block of the ears. And now the opposition decide to act. And they go to court, ask the court to review this. They're not even waiting on the court. They're already admitting that we are in violation. We hope that the opposition will pull the case. We go ahead tonight that the opposition is falling for that. However, it's been announced as we are coming on air that nomination day is postponed. So in effect, the election has been postponed. these are two very important matters that we're going to talk about tonight, and we have the team that is well placed. Roysdale Ford, a man don't talk plenty, and when he speaks, you listen because he don't talk plenty, and he's the lead lawyer. I understand behind these cases. Some may say he's not a political man. He's a legal man more than a political man. The two are indivisible. But just in case you all are thinking that we don't have politics, Khemraj Ramjattan, who is a political man, but who is also on top of the legal situation, he's here. And just joining us is one of your favorite guests who has abandoned us for quite a few months, but we've been able to get into the business of journalistic kidnapping. Amanza Walton, Desir, she's here tonight. And so we got what the young people will call an all-star team. All-star team. We're going into the Christmas season and we want to nice it up. But when we talk about nice on this program, you know we're not talking about how you look. We're talking about substance. See, that's what they can't beat me with, you know. Substance. No, the nice in the market don't determine the sale. You all know that. So welcome everyone down to Politics 101 tonight. We're getting down to serious business. It's Thursday night. It's been quite a week. I know after Nigel's story last night, you're all still there scratching your head and so on and things. Where are we going as a country? But we're going in the right direction. We are going in the right direction. As I always say, we are winning. We are winning. Every time you get them on the back foot, not only on the back foot, you pin them on the back foot. LBW, umpire. So they must say, how is that? And this story, I don't have DRS. You don't have DRS. They have to postpone the election. The local government election, everybody was saying, should the opposition contest or not contest? And so we were jumping the gun. We forced them to postpone the election. And somebody was asking me yesterday, Dr. Hinds, can an act of parliament be taken to court? Yes. I'm not a lawyer. But I know that there's something called judicial review. So, keeping on the people who know more than me. Roysdale, Brother Roysdale, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Hinds. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Keeping at
You must be doing well. You almost cause a miracle. Teacher George from the village, George Young would say, oh, Jesus Christ, they postpone the election, wall going. Hey, let me bring you, Brother Khemraj.
I am doing all right too, and I'm glad that you're in a nice mood here this afternoon after.
Wonderful mood.
all because of Roysdale, you know, he put in a lot of work here.
Mr. Amanza, good evening. How are you feeling?
Good evening, Dr. Hinds. I'm good, thank you.
Good evening to my brother. You heard the election postponed?
So I heard.
Teacher John said, war go end. Sisters and brothers, the issue you know, look, a lot of our supporters, and we I'm sure you all understand this, a lot of our supporters, because of the manner in which these people are governing, the bullyism, the discrimination, a lot of our supporters sometimes get very cold on these avenues of struggle. And so, you know, they feel that the only way we can win is make one push on the road and banner. and they don't know sometimes you got to go wrong so and come wrong so, you know, in order to get the fullness of the thing. So whenever moments like these arise, we must hammer it into our people that we are winning. We are winning. Roysdale, let me start with you. Tell us what's in these amendments to ROPA that were passed the other night. It seems to be a menu of things that they changed.
Well, Dr. Hines, I believe that the proposals, the amendments that were laid by the government a few nights ago in the National Assembly, they're seeking, firstly, to find mechanisms to entrench themselves in government and to lay the foundation for the steal and the snatch of the next national and general regional elections. They will want to say in their propaganda, as the Attorney General said on the night, and the members of his government, that they're simply trying to ensure that every single Guyanese, wherever they may live, based on a decision of the Chief Justice in a case called Ram, one of the many Rams, Christopher Rams, and the Attorney General, that dealt with the issue of whether Guyanese should be resident to vote or not to vote. They were simply implementing that law. That decision, that interpretation of that decision, that Guyanese are, the residency requirement is not necessary. And therefore, they would want to say that they're opening it up to Guyanese throughout the world to come back to Guyana and to register and to vote because they're entitled to do so on the basis of a residency requirement no longer being in the law. But Dr. Hines, the amendment that they brought to the National Assembly affected a number of pieces of legislation. It affected the National Registration Act, it affected the Election Laws Amendment Act, the Representation of the People's Act. And in every instant, Dr. Hines, wherever the words resident appeared or residency appeared, another form of that main word, that verb, they simply decided that they were going to strike it out of the law and to replace it with the words registered with an address. And then the legislation required the GCOM authority to ensure that they must go and verify that someone who would have been making an application to register is there at an address. Now, qualitatively, Dr. Hines, residency and having an address are two distinctly different matters. You could easily measure whether someone is resident at a location and what it means, as opposed to someone saying, I have an address at a location, because it connotes no degree of permanency. It doesn't say what this address must be. Is it my work address? Is it my business address? What constitutes an address? I could decide that my address is a football field, is a community center ground. There's nothing in the legislation, despite the double talk by Nandalal, that it is in fact where you live. If it is where you live, says where you live, no? But they fail to do that in the legislation. They make it deliberately vague, sufficiently vague for corruption, sufficiently vague so that any person could come and say, I got an address here. So you're going to find, Dr. Hines, that over the next year, this is not going to resolve our bloated lists. It's not going to fix the problems of substitute voting and electoral malpractice and fraud, which has been refined into a high science for generations by the People Progressive Party. They are now going to use this vague provision in the legislation to encourage people who you can't verify. There's no way to verify if this man is there with a list. There's no way you could go back ever and check to see whether he's there at that address. Because even though the legislation says, Dr. Hines, that before first-time applicant simply pulls out his paper and say that he's living at an address, GCOM and the opposition members of parliament, represented through their scrutineers in the areas, the opposition parties and the government, they must go to this address. But Dr. Hines means big people. Nobody's silly here. When the PPP organize themselves in the communities in which they have a predominance, historically and electorally, they're going to identify 15 houses. So where the people don't know that 35 of them not living are there at that address. So when you turn up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you have a list of 65 people. You're wondering if there's a hotel you come to. Maple Sue, Dorothy Sam, Uncle Ben, Auntie Mary, and you're running through. Hundreds of people could be at an address at a home. What is the purpose of implementing such a vacuous piece of legislation without ensuring in the legislation that those terms are sufficiently defined with particularity that even GCOM itself could know what it means? Because you know, Dr. Hines, you can't determine what is my address. If I tell you that my address is at the corner of Camp and Regent Street, there's no requirement in the law anymore that I must live there, that I must sleep there, I must have a family there, I must have some connection with it. You see, this is a very dangerous development. And it is, and I'm sure my friend and brother Khemraj will deal with it in the context of what is effectively an inversion of what would have happened over the last 30 years. I'm not going to go there, but I believe I've laid a sufficient foundation. I don't want to hog the program. So my colleagues.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that opening salvo there, because I think it is a very, very important tactic. If my memory serves me right, this issue came up in Trinidad. I think must have been 20 years ago. Khemraj could help out here. The constituency here, where someone lives in a particular constituency, but gets an address in another constituency where I think it was the UNC at that time, is very weak. So that person ends up voting twice. Voting in his or her constituency, but voting another constituency to help the party that is weak in that constituency. And I think that matter went to court. And I was, before I came on the program, I'm looking for it, but I didn't find. But it's a very, very important piece of information as far as the rigging technique is concerned. Well, let me go to Amanza. Well,
Dr. I just wanted to add one thing, because you reminded me of something there. There are many geographic constituencies. This is at the national and regional elections level, where the results of the elections are determined, for example, in Region 8, by 2 votes, by 5 votes.
Yes.
You could imagine, Dr. Hines, if you just decide that you're going to move people with an address, they're not connected there, they're not connected there. You just fly over the Madhya area and you just drop 75 persons, just like that. They don't have no connection to the community. Nobody know them. They never went to school. They're married there. They're not nobody cousin. They're never from there. They don't live there. Nothing. They just got an address, Dr. Hines. You see what's going on here?
Yes. Amanza, come in, because you had some stinging remarks you made in the National Assembly the other night there while this thing was being debated. What about this bill that jumps out at you and that you think is so integral to the plot to manipulate elections?
Thank you again for having me, Dr. Hines. I think my concern is exactly what Senior Counsel indicated. Among other things, this is nothing but a move that is intended to entrench the PPPC, and they are using the events of the March 2020 elections, and they are intending to, I think, capitalize on some of the outrage that they perceive was felt about this issue, to be able to do this sleight of hand. So this is why we were insisting that this thing must go to a select committee, because it will, you see the points that Senior Counsel just made, those are matters that must be fully ventilated and be placed on record. They wouldn't want to send it to a select committee, however, because they know that these are a matter of records and they're in the Hinds'Sight and they're there for historical purposes. So it is the sleight of hand that worries me. And the other thing that concerns me is electoral reform is a serious issue. And if you begin on a faulty premise, you are likely to end up very, very far from the destination. And you're likely not to be able to produce a type of electoral reform that Guyana desperately needs. The other issue that I had is just the disrespect of the PPPC in the manner in which they brought this bill. The PPPC wants people to forget what happened those previous years and to operate as if 2020 has been the only elections marred by these types of irregularities. And I am not at, there may be some people who are at liberty to do that, but I am not at liberty to forget. I lived those years, and so I remember very, very well the irregularities that manifested themselves. So for me, it is the sleight of hand and then the provisions that have very, very far-reaching effects that concern me. The doing away with house-to-house registration is an issue that is of significant concern to me, because this is something that when you look at the amendment to the ROPA and the amendment to the National Registration Act, they have omitted from Section 9 of the NRA, I think it is, the issue of house-to-house registration. So GCOM no longer has that option. Why is it that you are removing that option from GCOM? That is what worries me. So when you think about that, you think about the point that Senior Counsel just made about just an address that you have no material connection to. And you think about the fact that particularly when it comes to LGE, local government election, the fact of the removal of that requirement just flies in the face of the whole principle of local government, which is that the people who live and dwell in a community best know its needs and therefore are in the best position to have a say in the local governance. What this is basically going to do is that I could have a registered address someplace else, not eat there, not live there, but have a say in determining the direction and the development of that community. And that certainly is not what was intended when the framers of our Constitution set about providing for local governance. When you compound these amendments with the current attitude you see of bypassing local democratic organs, of the minister engaging in gerrymandering, it has to concern us. And it has to be that enough voices are raised to say, look, hold on, this has far-reaching implications. It has to be subject to more rigorous scrutiny, and we must have wider participation than we are seeing. I want to end off by saying kudos to Senior Counsel for the court action that was brought, you know, and it galls me that we always have to get to court action when this was a matter that was brought to the attention of GCOM, not once, not twice, not 3 times, by our commissioners. Why is it that if you understand that this is materially irregular, you can't course correct without having to be coerced by the court? And so those circumstances really cause me serious concern, because it says that our institutions are not functioning in the manner that you know the framers of our Constitution intended.
Thank you very much, Amanda, Walton, Desir, for your opening remarks there. Khemraj, let me bring you in, and you're important to this discussion for at least 3 reasons. One, that you are a lawyer. Second, that you have long political experience. And thirdly, a large part of that experience has been in the PPP. So you, the four of us, you know that beast better than all of us put together. And so therefore, your take on these amendments is very important in framing the larger political intent and how this thing, as your colleagues have already said, how this thing has tentacles, not just in what is before us, but in the larger electoral, constitutional, and political architectures. What do you?
Thanks, David. And I'm glad that you mentioned the kind of institutional memory that I will have, being long time with the PPP in matters like these. And that is why I regard this thing as extraordinarily dangerous. This is not only a case. This is not only litigation. I happen to have been the public security minister during the March elections. And I know the sentiments of people when they feel that they're going to be robbed and what they can do and what we have to do to avoid the explosion that we might have had we not done those things in the 2020 period. And so I think it is all coming back in a big way. Because if we were to go right back to 1992, the exact scenario that is happening here happened then when, as you would appreciate, the list in 1990 that Desmond Hoyt had wanted to go into the elections was riven asunder by all manner of duplicates and a number of things and thousands upon thousands of overseas voters. And you remember the PPP then, Janet Jagan and Cherry Jagan and that same Clement Rohi and Gail Teixeira. I was a young fella in the PYO and all of that. We were fighting for a list that must be cleansed and rinsed totally. And in that context, we argued, and I used to write some articles in the Mirror newspaper those days. We argued that the people who must be on the voters list must be resident here in Guyana, and we must have proof of that residency. And proof of that residency can only come from GCOM going to their homes to find them. And all the houses they had to go to in Guyana, literally, to find a name and the person living in that house, that address and whatever. And then we had a voters list that became what you call pure. Might not be perfect, but it was pure to the extent that you ain't got all these bloats, 200,000 as we got now. In those days, I think it was about 86,000. And then Cherry and all the Carter Center and everybody said, well, hold on, could you adjourn the elections? Desmond Hoyt, Mr. Hoyt, Senior Counsel. And he said, yes, I am going to do it because the pressures came. The Americans today, the Canadians and the English and the European Union must know that history. The present cohort of ambassadors from those countries seem not to appreciate that history. That bloat was fought for. And that was the reason why every 8 years it was decided we will have a brand new house to house to ensure the purity of the list. Because Guyana, since those days, had the highest diaspora rates, people going and leaving the country, migration. So if in 1992, you had a set of people there, by 2000, you had a whole set of Guyanese gone. And that is why in 2001, we had another house-to-house registration to pure the list of those who gone to live in America, Canada, Europe, wheresoever, Trinidad, Antigua, wherever they gone. And so you get back. And that was not unconstitutional, when you remove their names via house-to-house registration? There was nothing. You're not disenfranchising nobody, because if on the qualifying date those 89,000 people had wanted to come back to Guyana to register, well, then they could vote. But you purify the list. And what was the purpose for purifying the list? Ask the PPP again. Ask Gail Teixeira and Donald Ramutar and Barra Jagdeo and all of them, they were there. It was the reason was to ensure that people are not going to impersonate on the date of elections and vote 2 times. Impersonation was the reason, because when you make sure that the list is pure with the individuals that are resident in the various places, when they go duck their hand there's no need, because they is one ID voter, the ID card they would have, and they will ensure that they vote once. But when you get a bloated list, you're creating the foundation for impersonation. And it is now that we have to understand from hindsight what that recount stated, because Cherry Jagan and all of them in the PPP then knew, even you, David Hines, we were all there. We knew that this list is a rotten list because people could be impersonating. And we had indicated at that time the PNC was doing all of that. And the PPP said, no, it must not be done. Carter sent to Desmond Height, and now everybody agreed. And so we cleared the air about that and the necessity for having what is called a residency requirement that is going to be called from a house-to-house registration. This PPP now has turned that on its head. Could you imagine them fighting for democracy in 1992 and today they want a bloated list? It is a shame. It's shameless for that PPP now that love to talk about democracy, want the fundamental not being there. They don't want that fundamental to be there, because the fundamental of an elections is a proper voters list. And they are using this quirk or queer decision that you had there, which says that the residency requirement is not a requirement. Well, I am arguing, and like we're going to argue in this next local government case, that it is. House-to-house registration was never unconstitutional. And it rinses the list of all the thousands of names that then can go on to do impersonations. Why is it now that they're deleting it? And I am saying that you should not delete it because it's dangerous. People are going to feel that they are being robbed of an elections. You remember what the Bat people do when they felt that they were being robbed? They got and chop up policeman. Well, if you get the other side now feel that they're being robbed, you're going to see what can happen, the explosiveness. And that is what I'm warning here, Fanali and Barjagdeo. And I spoke to Anil Nandalal about it. You cannot go and do this in this in drastic manner, whereby you're now deleting residency requirement. And so it is important that this history be understood. The PPP got 2 motives behind this bloated list. They're going to do a couple thousand impersonations, especially within their stronghold. That same area that, there was an allegation that the Attorney General and so on, and we had to send Basil Williams and I think Amna Ali to check on him. But the other thing is also that when you register and you get the names of these bloated people, the PPP could bring in a couple plane load of people to vote here in the elections. When they're not resident in Guyana, they ain't got nothing to do with Guyana. And that is what is the biggest shame too. So for 2 reasons, they want that bloat to be there, because they know elections are going to come very tight. The poll is stating for the 3.6 and for the 3.2, AFC 7.8 or thereabouts. But whatever it is, it'll go. And so you just got to thief a couple thousand votes. And how you could thief the couple thousand votes is with a bloated list. And that is why it is very important, because look, people didn't understand how the PPP could do this thing. But the more you look at that recount and see that 4,229 people who were not in the country managed to vote, they like to say, but how you have scrutineers? Well, we had some jagabats for scrutineers too. They didn't turn up on time. Some of them, and by the time they turn up, 140 people vote. They turn up 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock time, 140. How so many people vote? All kind of machinations happen. And that is also the reason why they don't want biometrics now. Because if you got a bloated list and you got a biometrics and you're going to put your fingerprint there, you're going to say, well, Ramjattan, now go and put your finger. That is Ramjattan, right? That is genuine. Good. Go and vote. So if another man comes to vote for Ramjattan and you put your fingerprint, it's not going to be there. So they don't want the biometrics too. This PPP wants to rig the next elections, general. And they also probably want to rig the local government. But thank God everything now stopped. But coming back to the point, these are the reasons why. And when we checked in that recount, thank God there was a recount, in a sense, because the recount proves so much of the machinations. And the deductive process now is in front of us to see that that is what they did. How come so many people not in the country? And it's talk about, that they could have come with another passport and all of that. Remember, I think Amanza brought that to the attention of the British High Commissioner, that the people, once you come back in, it will be plugged into the system, whether you come with whatever passport, your American passport or your Guyanese passport. It will show that you arrived in the country. But nothing was shown. And so this is dangerous. And let me tell you something. I have already heard people now understanding the situation, saying what they will do and what they will not do. And so we are in a tinderbox here. You need a match. And that could just explode. And all this oil thing and this one Guyana and all kind of nonsense could all come to zero. Zero. And I'm warning the PPP, you better get your act together. And it is important. And by the way, I want to make this final point here. Even if you feel that the High Court rule that indeed the residency requirement is not necessary, you yourself, from your moral perspective, not your legal perspective anymore, your moral perspective, your ethical perspective, but we got to get residency as the requirement. Let's amend the law and to make it explicit there if we haven't as yet made it explicit. And then put it in there. Call in the opposition and say, let's have this thing done. Because that is what they were fighting for. And that is what we changed the law for. Height and them changed the law. And then is when we got the elections that brought the PPP back in power after so many 28 years or whatever. Now today, they upturn the whole blasted system and they want to say that they're democratic and they're rule of law. They're not. They're a pack of thieves and riggers.
They are not.
Dr. Hinds.
Yes, go ahead, Amanza.
I wanted to make another point coming off of what Khemraj said, so that we understand this grand scheme. When you consider that earlier in the last session of Parliament, the PPP brought an amendment to the Registration of Births and Deaths Act that lowered so significantly, if you recall, the standard for establishing your right to be issued a Guyanese birth certificate. It was lowered to the degree that a Tushao, a JP could certify to say, yes, this is you were born here. When you couple the fact that you could have corrupt officials and that residency issue that is now removed, you understand how this is being gone about in a very sneaky, underhanded manner to take advantage of the list the bloated list one, to add people onto the list who are not legally entitled to be on there by virtue of the fact that they may not be Guyanese, but because they were able to get a sympathetic Tosha or a sympathetic JP to say, this is Mary, she was born there, and take that to the GRO to get a Guyanese birth certificate, which they will then take into any GCOM office, not at house. The house registration is no longer required. They take it into the office to say, look, this is me. I'm entitled to be on the voters list. It is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. And if you look further down the line, what you will see is that Guyanese, legitimate Guyanese, people who are entitled to Guyanese citizenship as a result of them being from Guyanese parentage, etc., they're going to have that entitlement, as it were, diluted.
Diluted.
And so this is very, very, very serious. Very, very serious.
Very, very serious. And I remember when that birth certificate thing was saying, you warned, you had a mouthful to say to them in the National Assembly. Councillor Royce, let me come back to you, because there are two aspects of this story that I want you to talk about. One is these hefty fines for people who ostensibly try to rig the election. One, where is an election rigged? Is an election rigged when the votes go into GCOM, or are we saying here the rigging start long before that? What is the objective of these hefty fines for people who ostensibly try to break the law? And secondly, I want you to talk about this breaking up of regions 3, regions 3, 4, and 6. I think I get them right there. Regions 3, 4, and 6. Over to you.
Dr. Hines, the rigging of an election, as you would have seen from the recount, did not occur on election day. That was a serious plan that was put in place by the People's Progressive Party many years in advance, before the elections are actually held on the day. While the argument was advanced by our side in the National Assembly, principally by Amanza, that the fines are going to serve as a disincentive to the hiring of competent people, I believe that it is really and truly possibly can be seen from another perspective, which is really, it is just words on a piece of paper. Because I honestly believe when we look at the nature of the governance and the rule of law aspect of the PPP over the past 3 to 4 years, well, 2 years that they've been in government, and you extend how they behaved over a previous period, that is just, those are simply words for the public and for the diplomatic community, that they've made this fundamental grandstand against electoral fraud. You're getting 10 years jail and $100,000 fine and $10 million fine. Because right now, there are numerous public officials who are committing all sorts of crimes. And this government is not acting in a way to allow the Guyanese people to believe that they're law-abiding. They're not inspiring any confidence, and I have none in them, to believe that when they have a CEO there who they would have fought for relentlessly to get him there, or you have some official, and we've discovered during this local government period, that the commission, Dr. Hines, the commission is hiring dozens and dozens of persons who are known party hacks of the PPP. So you imagine me living in the reality that I live in, and the reality that Guyanese people live in, to know that the PPP does not engage in any law-abiding activity, who believing that any chief elections officer supported by them, or any returning officer supported by them, who commits any malpractice, in the event that the PPP happens to sneak back through their fraudulent activities to get back into power, is ever going to be charged for anything. You know, Dr. Hines, during the last electoral cycle, on election day, in Region 3, the returning officer, we received reports that the returning officer there refused to conduct a recount.
Yeah.
But you're not hearing the PPP condemning that. You're not hearing that. You're not hearing any explanation from what they happen in their supposed strongholds. So I believe that those are simply words on a piece of paper. There are simply words on a piece of paper to provide a propaganda basis. It's simply words on a piece of paper to console the diplomatic community into falling for the type of things that they're saying there. Just as how they misled the High Commissioner, who caused her to make that clear statement back then, that nothing is wrong with the electoral list for local government elections, we can use it. They have embarrassed that lady. Because the same commission now doing a Usain Bolt as fast as they can from the own list that they prepared. So I believe that this is nothing of substance. And in relation
what
to
about
the
yes.
In relation to the regions 3, 4, and 6 and the subdivision of them, my position, Dr. Hinds, is that this is fundamentally not only wrong but unlawful. Because I can't imagine that you could create, and the Attorney General in his usual walk style in the National Assembly said it, and I hope the public heard it. I said you cannot create an unequal electoral system. Why only you would have decided to reduce regions 3, 4, and 6 into subdivisions, but you have regions, all the other remaining regions, where the same fraud took place, the same mischief that you're seeking to deal with had occurred and can potentially occur. But you're focusing on 3, 4, and 6, and the rest of the regions are glorious. Those are regions that have great logistical challenges in order to move in ballot boxes from one area to the other area. You don't want that done there. You don't want it done there. So I believe that this is another part of the PPP's plan to put people in the communities by control of these subdivisions, to control the result, to block the tide of the will of the people to have free and fair elections by ensuring that they're there, intercepting, blocking, disturbing the free will of the people, especially in regions 4, where our party has a predominantly historically a stronghold. And despite all that they say in Region 6, there are extensive areas of Region 6 in which people stay home and vote. Stay home from voting. So there are all these different dynamics taking place in these areas when you're trying to do a number of different things. So you see, Dr. Hinds, what I'm saying and what my colleagues I'm saying, I hope I'm capturing their views also by being brave enough to say this. This is a regime of fraudulent mechanisms being put in place, none of which is necessarily inconsistent with the other. They're not inconsistent. The splitting up of Region 4, 3, 4, and 6 does not collide with the grand diabolical plan to drop people into areas with no identifiable basis for them to vote in a community. It is not, those two things themselves are not disconnected or inconsistent with the fraudulent process that you initiated to ensure that you have a low standard to be satisfied or to be met in order to obtain a board certificate. So this is a whole scheme that is now going to be rolled out, for which the Guyanese people and all the talk that we've had about democracy will be absolutely eroded.
Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford talking to us about this grand scheme. So we are supposed to be having electoral reform to improve the electoral system. But what the argument here from my guests is that the bill sets out to do the opposite, is to further corrupt the electoral system and to enshrine it now into law. See, dictators don't always get rid of the law. You know, there's all time dictatorship. You corrupt the law. And that was, and look, at a time when our sisters and brothers in the Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, places like Antigua and Dominica and Grenada, and so are grappling with this issue of people living overseas and shooting in on election day to vote. They just had an election in Dominica. The official opposition parties boycotted. They were awaiting a report by Justice Byron on reform, and the government preempted that by calling an election on the day that this report was supposed to be turned in. The fact of the matter is that our colleagues, our sisters and brothers in the rest of the Caribbean are seeking to unshackle themselves from that kind of bad business, and we are now entrenching it in the law. And I think, sisters and brothers in the audience here, we have to understand this. The rigging has begun, and the government, the PPP, is using the law, using their majority to enable that rigging, And we've got to stop it by, first of all, doing what we are doing here. And you almost listen and hear. Sometimes I will listen, but I will not hear. We have to listen and hear at the same time.
Well, you know,
because they are banking. And so, Amanza, let me bring you in here, because you made the point that those fines are meant to prevent, to dissuade good public servants, citizens, from being part of the process, working in the system. Expand on that for us.
I think it's exactly as senior counsel said. It is intended, look, a properly qualified teacher, for example, public servants who have traditionally been the people working on elections day. They're not interested in being a part of a system where if a genuine error is made, because it's a strict liability offense apparently, and something happens, that you are now being subject to all manner of fines and penalties. So they have failed to perform the balancing act that is required when you are making legislation. I was making the point someplace earlier today that if you look at the punishment for sexual assault and rape and murder and all of that, and you compare it with an election issue, there's no equilibrium between the issues in terms of seriousness of the offense. And so you have to, like counsel said, it is for show. Because if they see Amanza as not being a supporter of them, and she perhaps commits some error on the day, you had better be sure that they will throw the book at Amanza, but somebody else who they perceive to be their supporter, they will not so do. And so we live in a small society. Automatically what that will do is say to people that are sympathetic to the PPP, look, you all are covered, man. You go, you do the rigging, you leave out the statutory documents out of the box, yes, like we see happen on the East Coast, and we have got you covered. Because if you look at it, you have not heard anything about those officers who were manning those stations being questioned or any such thing. And it is not passing strange that those boxes, the areas that they were found, are the same areas that you mentioned earlier tonight that the Attorney General had to be, the Attorney General had to be confronted in for the distribution of ID cards. It is not passing strange as well, and as Vincent Alexander, the commissioner, continues to maintain that when it came to the commission receiving the statements of toll for Region 4, they stopped receiving those statements at that same East Coast area. So you see, we have the benefit of hindsight. No pun intended. But the fact is that this is where you understand that the PPP is not genuine, because in all of their recollection of the events of March 2020 to August, they do not speak about the recount. And it is the recount that has them occupying the seat of government and tearing our democracy to shreds as they are. But you don't hear them speaking about it, because it exposed for the entire world to see the mechanisms and the machinery, and not one of those polling day staff from the East Coast there have been hauled before the court. They have not been brought before the Commission of Inquiry. You do not hear about them. It is as if they never existed.
Yes, yes. Khemraj, as we wrap up this section, you sounded that ominous warning that we're really in effect playing with a lot of trouble here. And you and I have been in this thing long enough. And we know how these things operate. You know, it boils up in people. You go into the communities and people come to you, and sometimes they want to really kill us on the opposition, because I feel that sometimes we don't understand what you are saying there, Khemraj, that this is serious business. What next on this issue?
Well, before I go what next, let me indicate that I believe too, as part of the motivation for these high fines and lengthy imprisonment, it has what is called behind it, the PPP will pull its clout on those who it feels might do an independent professional job, and will want to persuade them to either shut them out if they see wrong things, because they could use it. And it also drives fear. Let me tell you something. Whenever you get those large possibilities for as penalties for doing your job at an elections, you're going to want to back off.
That's right.
You're going to back off. And it will back off a lot of teachers and nurses and whosoever the public servants that used to do it. And then what you're going to get? You're going to get a set of, what would Sherrod just call them? No, honestly, and that is what I believe is the motivation. Because that is obviously one of the reasons why you're going to up the penalties, as against when you compare the other criminal law provisions. You know, massive hikes in these penalties. It is but to drive fear in those officers that will man the system, and that they could come and easily make allegations, and they would be in power, so the people are going to back away. Today, I could see the fear in so many people that they have knocked off. They don't even want to carry the matter to court. They don't even want to go bring litigation for wrongful dismissal and so on. They are starting to drive a lot of fear all over the place. And this fear factor is what I believe also is behind this thing. But where do we go? What is the next step? I believe that we have to ensure, first of all, like in programs like these, that the large majority of the population understand how the deception is occurring via the legal means. Law was always an instrument of the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
And the administering of the law can even be worse when you now go and you start executing on that law for doing all these mischief. And then with the mischief, additional things like a new Jim Crow that happened in America. They stopped doing the thing by blatant oppression of the black people. They had a new Jim Crow. You get a lot of rights and all of that, but you ain't get no rights at all when it comes down. And that is what might happen here. The PPP fought, yes, for free and fair elections, okay. But now what they're doing is they're fighting for rigged elections so that they could stay there where the oil monies apparently is such a big impetus, a big stimulant for them. They could get, do all manner of things against that big tradition that the party had. And that is the reprehensible nature of that PPP under Jack Dale now. And, they got plenty people who understands that this could happen. It is not as because the PPP is there. I remember Ralph Ramkaran, the same argument he used to say that, we're going to change as soon as we get into government. That all them presidential powers, it's too bad a thing. And when they get into government, prior to the change of government, they say you're going to change all of that. When they get into government, they say, well, Cherry Jagan is the president, so we don't have to be fearful of him utilizing the thing and so on. But like he didn't realize that Cherry might die sometime and you're going to get some other fellas who could utilize the powers and so on and do all kinds of things. And we didn't never really change that. Today, we are seeing the same thing happening. And we got to let the people understand, first of all. We have to understand, let the diplomatic community understand, and right-thinking, independent-minded people understand. And I think the business community too. Because let me tell you something, if the situation gets explosive, you know who's going to suffer the most? Is the business community.
Yeah.
And if the business community don't want to bring back that which we fought for in 92 back into stream, but talking there and yapping their silly things that, okay, we don't want to disenfranchise people, that is a lot of trash. The business community saw how these lists were procured via house to house, and it did remove the names of all those people.
It did remove the names of all those people.
Now. So they got to understand that it is not the disenfranchisement argument that is the bad one here. It is the impersonation, the capacity to impersonate and get the PPP back there. People are not going to take that. I know people are not going to take that. I myself being very, very, hard to change in relation to getting angry quickly on this issue. Because I know civil strife can bring bloodshed in this country. They don't understand that even people like me getting angry with them. Because the fight for democracy, the fight for free and fair elections is an important fight. I fought for that as a youngster. I don't want now the party that I've been in that kick me out because you question them, gonna go and do that and I ain't gonna say nothing. I got to say plenty. And I got to say to this new generation, because the new generation out there, I go to 1-2 clubs and so on, have my Friday night drinks and so. Them fellas didn't know what happened in 1992.
Yeah.
They do not know. And that is why we got to bring back all them books that Janet Jagan did write. Elections crooked like a barbed wire.
Barbed wire.
Remember that one? Yes, and show them what they were fighting for. And now look what these jagabats want to continue and bring back those days. Look, it is very, very dangerous. And that is the movement I think initially we got to make. Tell the diplomatic community. Go and tell our supporters. Because let me tell you something. We got a lot of supporters in the opposition that don't understand how they could do that. I mean, what was so bad? The thing looked benign. It is not malign.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is very much malign, not benign. And this is what makes it dangerous. But some of them fellas didn't understand it. We got to start, because in today's world, I want to make the statement again. Clarity is power. And once we clear it up in the heads of the people, they know what action they will take. and even for the diplomatic community when they now realize, hold on a minute, this thing is not to disenfranchise the people overseas. This thing is really to create the foundation for impersonations. And they will also appreciate that. And they're going to start telling them, no, hold on a minute. Just like they're telling them more inclusion, more equitable distribution of the oil monies. They're telling them, they're warning them. But you got some hard-ass people, and they are listening to an attorney general that seems to have no morality on this issue.
Yeah.
Because, of course, he was not in that 1992 period.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand it. And you got people like Clement Rohi in that GCOM now don't want to tell them. He should go and tell them what happened in 92. What caused the arguing for a brand new list via house to house, and what created the conditions for house to house.
And what is important, Khemraj, about 1992 is that there was consensus.
Absolutely.
Desmond Hoyt
That's right.
came to the table with the PPP and the WPA and some other smaller parties and came to a consensus.
The business community too.
Yes.
Yes, super
that
sad.
caused him to be vilified by some in his own party. That is what we are missing today. That there is no statesman or stateswoman in the PPP, and that says a lot. Also, Roysdale, let me bring you in here now. The headline in all the online papers today and in the printed papers tomorrow will be elections, local government election postponed. You went to court. And so you are to be blamed. You are to be blamed in a good way for causing good trouble. What drove you to court, and what are you asking the court to determine?
Well, Dr. Hanks, what drove me to court is the fact that I was convinced that the Elections Commission was abandoning their responsibility. You know, we speak a lot tonight about electoral matters, but I am not of the view, Dr. Hanks, that we have a focused, fair, and competent umpire in this current electoral cycle here. So I was convinced and satisfied that, having regard to the law, that one, the Elections Commission was abandoning. Am I still here, Dr. Hanks? Hello?
You're fine. You're fine. We are hearing you fine.
Oh, everything froze for a bit there just now.
Okay,
I was saying
go ahead.
that I was satisfied that the Elections Commission was abandoning the responsibility, and they were veering off from what was required. Now, Dr. Hanks, it is no doubt, and it cannot be denied, that under the local government election laws, residency is a requirement. Now, under the process adopted by the Elections Commission and the Chief Elections Officer, in which it purported to apply, was under Section 5.6 of the Election Laws Amendment Act, which required that a list prepared for national and regional elections could be used for local government elections. But as I indicated to the press earlier today, we must understand the context under which that section would have been passed. That section was passed in the year 2000, not long after the views expressed by Khemraj, and which you are well aware of, in terms of the need to have residency as a requirement, the need to have house-to-house voting. So what happened by that legislation is that there was consistency, both at the national level, the regional level, and the community level, in terms of a residency requirement. Now, even though this law was passed in 2000, it has never once been used for a local government election. A list was never extracted for national elections to use for local government elections. The problem now, Dr. Hanks, is that by the decision of the Chief Justice in the Ram case that I referred to at the commencement of our discussions this evening, removed, according to the the view of the court, remove residency as a requirement for voting at the national and regional elections. So, not conscious, I should say, I'm not acting in a deliberative manner, being aware of that decision, in which I believe that the commission should have acted in that manner. They decided that they were going to apply that list to a completely different regime in which residency was a requirement. Now, we can't allow that because we would have been allowing the same electoral list based on the same premise for which we fought for many years, yourself and Khemraj, which deals with residency, to come into electoral system and to be a contaminant, because you will now be using a list in which persons are not resident to conduct an election that is completely premised on people being resident in communities. So that was why I challenged it. And secondly, Dr. Hinds, the process adopted by the Guyana Elections Commission deprived the citizens and the electorate from being able to participate in a claims and objection period based on a local government system, premised on a system in which they could object to people being or not being in their residential areas in which they live within their communities. So I found that, having regard to what was being attempted by the Elections Commission, no doubt at the instance of the government, that they were going to seek to run the local government elections as a national elections. And what they really was trying to do, Dr. Hinds, is that, you know, Barajab, you think he's the biggest person with brains in Guyana. He's the only one who could think, right? Because what they were attempting to do was to create the argument for the benefit of the diplomatic community that, look, they run about lists, but they run on the same list. The list is good for local government elections. It must therefore be good for national and regional elections. But they didn't anticipate that we would have gone to court, that we would have stood up and defended our position on the question of the applicability of that list to the current circumstances.
Amanza, you want to come in and give us your thoughts on this recent development?
Well, look, it's a most welcome development, and I think it is in keeping with what we have been saying to Guyana and to our supporters all along, that we are interested in exploring all the legal means necessary to bring this government, available to us, to bring this government to account. It is difficult sometimes, as you have expressed and as Khemraj has expressed, to have your supporters rein in, to give the law and the legal system a chance to work. But I believe that this latest action has indicated that, look, we will continue to press, we will continue to insist that our institutions function in the way it is. Senior Counsel is absolutely right. GCOM, as a constitutional body with a duty to the people of Guyana, they're abdicating their responsibility. And I used the term when I was speaking at the last debate about the democratic backslide that we are seeing. Khemraj spoke about the fight in 1992. There's a continuous backsliding from democratic norms that we're seeing happening here in Guyana. And it has to concern us. The issue is bigger than about getting into power. The issue is that these are fundamental norms for any society to properly develop. And so any Guyanese interested in Guyana developing in a sound manner and not in a distorted and mutated manner will stand up and support us in what we are trying to accomplish here, and that is proper electoral reform. The PPPC loves to go about telling people, oh, we're not interested in electoral reform. We are not interested in participating in shams.
That's right.
You know, there's a generation of people, myself, Senior Counsel, we're tired of all of this. We want to see Guyana progress. We want to see Guyana set on sound footing. And we want to see Guyana to realize all of this potential that we've been hearing about since we were in nursery school. And so this is a struggle to ensure, because if you are building a house, if your foundation is not sound and you put stuff on that foundation, it will crack, it will fall apart. These are matters that go to the foundation of our democracy. And if we are not prepared to defend it, if we are not prepared to struggle to defend it, whatever happened, so happened. However, the house bill, it's a bill, because we would have failed in our duty to speak up when it was important that we speak up. And whilst we may not be here, our children will have all of this fall on their heads, because we, through neglect, through apathy, failed to speak up when it mattered the most. And it matters the most now. We are living in a time where Guyana we've never known this much wealth in terms of monies available for proper development. There is no glory, Dr. Hines. There is no glory to be found in oppressing one segment of your society. The glory is to be found in ensuring that every Guyanese is able to develop, to benefit, and to live to their fullest potential. So to the extent that you continue to see victimization and discrimination and inequality of access to resources, you are seeing a government that does not care about Guyana being on a sound developmental trajectory. And we will continue to speak up. We will continue to use our parliamentary platform. We will continue to use the courts, because those are the avenues available to us. I shudder to think about what will happen if what Khemraj is warning about will come to pass. I shudder to think.
Shudder to think. Khemraj, Wayne. Oh, yes, go ahead, Roysdale.
Dr. Hanks, I just wanted to touch on something that I believe might have blown past us. A couple of things. First,
speak up a little. I'm not hearing you so well. Speak up closer to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I'm saying that in my presentation in National Assembly, I pointed out a couple of things that I believe was quite ironic. It was ironic, firstly, that a government that came to power by corrupt means would have been brave enough to come to the National Assembly to pass legislation on the guise of reform. And it was also ironic that the Attorney General himself was somehow seemingly implicated in some sort of activity in relation to that elections. You would have thought in that context, Dr. Hanks, that we would have had meaningful consultation. We attended the consultation event that they had at the Artichon Convention Center. It ran for about 4 hours whilst we were there. And the Garrulous Nandalal spoke for 3 hours and 58 minutes. It was a monologue and not a consultation. I remember Khemraj saying over and over, this is a monologue. The reason why I'm mentioning this, Dr. Hanks, because where the PPP get off thinking that by getting a majority in parliament by 1 seat, by fraudulent means, they have the divine right, without engaging in effectual consultation with the Guyanese people, to bring this sort of legislation to parliament. You know, Dr. Hines, this is very important. This is the sort of issues that should be resolved by a referendum.
Yeah.
If the people want residency not to be there, let the people make that decision. Because for many years, all of our laws, as Khemraj pointed out clearly in the National Assembly, they were premised on residency. We had elections conducted on the basis of residency. So what the finding by the court that residency is not a requirement for voting is a fundamental decision. You know, I went back and I had a look at the Court of Appeals decision, because we all focusing on only what the High Court Justice George said. And I can't find the formal decision, but I went to the newspapers and the public could look at it. Justice Cummins the Chancellor said, and I'm paraphrasing, that whilst residency may not be a requirement for voting, residency is fundamental and part of our law for the purposes of registering to vote.
Yes.
So once you would have been qualified to register to vote, you need not have to be resident to vote. But now, Dr. Hines, everything gone.
Yeah, even the registration.
Everything is gone. And residency constituted the gatekeeper, the qualifying standard by which you had to meet. Now, all you have to do is get an address. All you have to do now is to get an address. And that is why I'm saying, Dr. Hines, in something of this magnitude, the government does not have the moral right. They may have the legal right by being in government, but they are without the moral right to make this sort of decision for the Guyanese people, without the failure to conduct effective consultation. They went into anybody in Buxton and asked them anything. They went to Linden and asked people anything. They went over the river. They went to the Cribble Coast. They went into the hinterlands and asked people anything. But the PPP and Mr. Nandalal, they're proud to say that they consulted with some organizations. Where is the voice of the people in this process? You're about to start a consultation process under the Constitution as the Constitutional Reform Commission, but you're running up helter-skelter, trying to stick this sort of depraved legislation into being before you start that process. It is very similar. It's very similar to what you mentioned earlier about the process that took place in Dominica. I just wanted to mention that, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Khemraj, Wayne, on the postponement of the local government election and your thoughts, other thoughts that you
well,
have.
it has now become undated because they, as I said in another program, or they catch themselves. You know, they now realize too that they just pass a legislation that if you don't do this thing in accordance with the law, you could get $10 million fine and 5 years jail too. And Mr. Vish Prasad, what's his name? Mr. Prasad, Vishnu, who now realize that this thing is wrong, what we're doing, could mean that he could be jailed for that long time and pay the fine for that long time. Because, like I said in I think it was Norman Brown show, or was it with you? I said that if these people do not do the thing in accordance with law, I personally might file private criminal charges to lock them up. They better get their act together. And I think I could get a mature force, understanding the reason why, and go to the DPP to get them locked up if they want to violate the laws. Every violation of the law is now a criminal offense, and they put up all these high positions. Well, they might be the first who will be bitten by that. And so they better get their bloody act together. It is not a threat. This is what we will do. We're carrying the statutory, the judicial review proceedings, but we could also bring private criminal charges against the CEO and all of them there who want to conduct elections not in accordance with the laws of the country, because that now becomes a criminal offense. You understand? So the GCOM officials must know the place. And let them go and ask Shalimar Hack, Senior Counsel, to go and drop the charges. She might very well get annoyed with them and say, but they've been speaking about this all the time. And even if she wants to discontinue, we're going to judicially review her discontinuance too.
There you go. There you go.
All of that is in our legal armory. And so they must know. And I believe that too also compel them to come clean and say, well, hold on. All of a sudden, they were the devils. All of a sudden, they became the angel. We are very concerned that half the population might not find it. And the nice little letter that Vishnu write. I mean, look, these people must understand now that their game is being understood. And once that is understood, and more as we could filter it down into the masses, you know, David Hinds, when you stir the masses, what can happen. And this is what we got to do. We got to stir them up.
Amanza, anything that you badly want to say that you didn't get to say? Now is your time.
That's what I could say them on TV, on live programming. That might be fit and proper when you consider just the level of chicanery that you see happening. But just to say to us, like I said, this is serious. We have a nation to build, and the safest ground to stand on is truth. Let us just proceed to do this in a manner that can benefit all Guyanese. There is enough for everybody. You know, it galls me when I see, you know, these photo ops, people going to build houses and so on for people, when with proper policy, the same man that going to say he pulling down step and building, he who will not be named, when the proper policy can impact the lives of so many people who are living in that condition. But we like the photo ops and the distractions. It's time for us to get down to serious business. We travel the world over and we go to developing and developed countries. They didn't get like that by accident. It was through hard work, through grit, and through the determination of a people who said, we will not be satisfied with substandard and mediocre. And that is the fire I believe we have to continue to stoke and to light in our people, that there is more than enough for everyone, that no Guyanese, given the natural resource bounty that we have, should be poor or skipping a meal per day, as the World Bank report suggests. It does not have to be that way, and we can absolutely change it, I believe, Dr. Hinds. Thank you for having me tonight.
Roysdale?
Dr. Hinds, I think that this is another opportunity, another reminder of the Guyanese people for us to understand the nature of the struggle and who we're struggling against. And I believe that it reminds us the nature of the current government, whilst they're seeking to take away your political rights, the constitutional rights to vote and to change and determine who governs over you. At the same time, I want the Guyanese people to understand the correlation between that and border market, between that and your ability to determine how you're going to get a better life. I want them to understand that whilst all these rights are being taken away, what is happening to you? You're getting 8% increase, whilst our government, whilst in power, provided you with over 77% increase over a number of years. Workers' rights were respected. There was a reduction in crime. There was increased performance at the educational levels in regional exams. There was a better healthcare system. There was a better quality of life. There was better conditions generally for Guyanese people, irrespective of race and class. So this is the old time thing, Dr. Hinds. I'm going to mix up one here with you now. The one take away your bread and get you a stone while beating you on your head with the same stone. Thank you very much.
Quite graphic there. Khemraj, you have the
I want to make a final point. And this is directed to our finale and the PPP. Let us get the politics of this country right. Today, I had the opportunity of going through a fantastic lecture given by James Robinson, who wrote, in association with another writer, the book Why Nations Fail. You probably know that book.
Yeah.
It's some 8 years ago. It was a bestseller. And it says that it is in the politics. We can have all the oil monies that we want, and we get it right now, having signed that deal. But if our politics is not right, and the politics involve voters list and so many other things, we are going to be a catastrophe. And so please, let us get this politics right. You want a one Guyana? It could be done. But we need you to do the things to ensure this is how we get there. We can help in that process. And we want to talk, but like they don't want to talk. Because of course, finally, he's not his own man. Jagdeo is the man. And that is the problem with this country. When you have a numero uno, a kind of the control freak he is, Jagdeo, is going to cause all kinds of problems to this young fella, Irfan Ali. But Irfan must take it upon himself and probably do like what Jagdeo did to Janet Jagan. Boss, you got to go. You got to go now. Although it was disrespectful. And so that we can get the politics right and move this country. We could be the greatest country in the Americas. Let us make it happen. Thanks.
Khemraj, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roysdale and Amanza. We certainly justice tonight to the issues that I have asked you guys to help us sort out. If I don't have you guys on before the end of the year, it's traditional Christmases. Merry Christmas. It's not too early to say that. And I don't want to say a prosperous new year, but a working new year where we keep our foot on the pedal. Don't let up, because we're up against people who perfected the art of ensuring a dictatorship with a smile and with yap about law and democracy. We have a big job before us. We're ending the year on a high. We'll get them to do what they did not want to do. That is the center of politics that we're talking about there just now. That is to back off from going forward with this local government election, which was really the test case for rigging the general elections. Thank you all so much. Thank you. And to you, my audience, I want to thank you all for staying with us. And remember, we are on our fundraising drive, end of the year fundraising drive, which we launched last night. Please contribute what little you can to our drive. We have some people here to thank. I want to thank Paula, Calvin, Josh, Shelly, Joseph. I want to thank those of you who've come through for us. We don't come to you every day. There is the WhatsApp Cash App, sorry. There is the Cash App and the PayPal, and I was told that some of you use Zelle. I think you can use this number 602-920-0120. That's 602-920-0120. Those of you who use Zelle, Cash App, of course, and PayPal. Again, whatever little you can contribute. This is the season of giving. And we have to keep these programs on the air. We have to ensure that we come here every evening. And as the people would say in the old days, suck it to them. And that means that we keep ourselves mobilized, keep ourselves organized, keep ourselves educated on the issues of the day. Ultimately, no change is going to come without the people. We are mere conduits. The power of the people is what's important. We're going to have a good weekend because we forced them to postpone the local government election. Please give whatever little gift you can give to us. The information is on the screen there. Whatever gift you can give to us, however small, those of you who can make it big, that too. But however small, so that we can keep Politics 101 in the air. Next year, we are going to be expanding. We are adding a podcast section to Politics 101. We are also thinking about adding a cricket commentary section to Politics 101 as we continue to up the ante against injustice, against bad governance. One dirty bill down. And of course, as we say, and wash and make and come clean. So we welcome whatever support you can give. This is, of course, our end of the year, whatever you want to call it, fund drive, support drive, whatever you call it. We welcome your support. And for those of you who have been giving your support throughout the year, you know who you are, and we continue to be ever thankful to you for keeping us on the air and keeping us expanding. So please support and support generously. Next week, very early, we're going to have Vincent Alexander and maybe some of the other commissioners, with the opposition commissioners, I mean, we're going to come here to talk about this postponement of the local government election from the standpoint of those who are at GCOM. The struggle continues. There can be no freedom without a demand. There can be no freedom without a demand. Struggle is important. And we are celebrating a victory, not because we want to gloat, but because it shows that when you keep probing, when you keep pounding away, joy cometh in the morning. Joy cometh in the morning. It may